Hey, Trev here from SpineWise, and today I want to talk to you if you're suffering from a mental health issue, whether it be anxiety, depression, motivational issues, maybe you're fixating on negative things, or perhaps you're just getting overly obsessive about stuff, then this video is for you. So I really want to talk to you about how simple physiological things may be contributing to what you're feeling, and how you may not be crazy for thinking that your periods and your cycles may actually be causing your mental health problems as well. Like always, guys, if you love our videos, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, turn on notifications, and like our Facebook page. It's the easiest way for us to keep you up to date with all the information that we put out, so you can keep up with all our videos. All right, so let's have a chat about brain health and mental health, because we get a little bit confused to think that sometimes that mental health is purely an emotional thing, but really our emotions are just part of a neural network that exists within our brain, and brain health is really what we want to talk about when we start addressing this stuff as well. So most importantly, I want to talk to you about a couple of key areas in the brain. So one of them is right in the middle, in this central area through here. And this is called your limbic system. And your limbic system really is your key emotional areas in the brain itself. That's where all our emotion is held. And the other area I want to talk about is this area right at the front here, which is known as your prefrontal cortex. And these are the two big things I want to talk about today, because these are the two big things that really do create issues for our mental health. So if we can imagine the first one here, which is our limbic system. Our limbic system is where all our emotions are held. This is where our fear-orientated memories, our survival memories are also maintained in a little structure called your amygdala. So the time that you bumped your head on a car when you were young, the time that you saw someone get shot on TV, the time you saw something horrific on the news, all these things get stored in there. Any time that there's a life-threatening action kind of gets stored in there, and it's modulated down constantly so that it only pops up when that event may be triggering your life or risks to your life right now. So for example, if you're scared of heights, then one of the things we know is when you get up to the heights, you may be driving that memory back up for whatever reason, and the result of that is it fires your stress mechanisms off. And that whole purpose of firing your stress mechanisms off is to do one thing and one thing only, and that is keep you safe. In other words, make you apprehensive about not wanting to go up onto that, or otherwise, if you are going up in that and you do happen to fall, to try and stop you from bleeding to death if you happen to lose a limb. And this is just our basic primitive nature of protection. The other area at the front of our brain is what we call our frontal cortex. And our frontal cortex is really a very unique area of the brain. And as a species, we're kind of the only ones that have really developed this area to a large extent. And we have a left and a right side to our prefrontal cortex. This is very easy or very important to remember. So the left one really behaves more like your dad. And I know being a little bit perhaps simplified here, and perhaps a little bit too generalized too in terms of with parents, but left side is more likely to be more like your dad, the right side is more likely to be like your mum. So the left side kind of yells at you all day and says, hey, get off your bum, go do something, make something of your life, tries to motivate you all the time, and then at the same time it's the first one to reward you and tell you, hey, you're doing amazing when things go right. Your right one's more like the mum side, and this is the one that kind of puts her arm around you and says, hey, you know what, don't stress, it'll all be fine. Life is great, you'll be okay, this is just a fleeting moment in time. Okay, and this is kind of how these two work. So the way they work with each other is that your emotions are always bubbling there. They're always trying to protect you, but this area here with our prefrontal cortex has a dampening effect. It's always trying to shut this area down. And the main reason it's trying to do that is so that our emotions don't get excessive. We don't fire off stress patterns all the time, which can actually be detrimental long term. And there's a few things that modulate and improve this function. Most importantly, there are two key neurotransmitters, or what we call neuromodulators, at the front. The first one you've probably heard of before, which is called serotonin, and the second one is called dopamine. And these two modulate the activity within the frontal lobe itself. So in other words, how effective are they at actually doing their job? So they kind of wind it up and wind it down, and this is what actually helps control our our emotional centers. So if you've been on antidepressants, or perhaps you know someone on antidepressants, you've probably heard the term SSRIs, and what they're actually doing, so drugs like Prozac, for instance, and what they're doing is raising and helping to keep the levels of serotonin higher in that frontal lobe, so that it has a greater effect at inhibiting our limbic system. But one of the key things we need to understand, and a lot of people don't realize, is that these substances, serotonin and dopamine, actually bind to a receptor which then allows the nerve to function. And this is the important part when we start talking about mental health and your hormones. Because when we start talking about the male brain, we are very different to the female brain. Again, we're being a bit simplified, but being very, very simple, very much more simple than what's happening with the female brain. So with men, really, these receptors are turned on. In other words, they're livened up. The microphone for these hormones, such as serotonin and dopamine, are increased predominantly by testosterone and by T3, which is one of your main thyroid hormones, or thyroid derivative hormones. So when we start having men drop testosterone levels down, we start seeing changes in serotonin functionality, which then changes this, which in turn changes our emotional complex. And if you think about the number one time we start really seeing, or two biggest times we start really seeing serotonin levels or testosterone levels drop in men, is when they start hitting their 40s, and secondly, when they're really under stress. There is another time that we do see testosterone changes in men, and that is if they're on a high carbohydrate diet. So they're starting to get a high amount of insulin, and this can actually cause estrogen levels to rise as opposed to testosterone. When we start looking at women, we're a little bit different. The brain is a little bit more different in its functionality because they have different hormones that are traveling through, and it kind of makes things a bit more complex. So what we really see is this area here with serotonin is really stimulated and increased by progesterone. Progesterone is really the big hormone that helps keep serotonin healthy in women. So when we start having deficiencies or dropping or lowering in progesterones, that's when we start seeing serotonin problems in women. And this is why so many women who have problems with progesterone, as they get towards the end of their cycle, just about to menstruate, will start developing things like anxiety, perhaps even motivational issues to some extent, negative fixation, obsessiveness, that moody kind of aggressive snappiness that a lot of women experience premenstrual. And that has a lot to do with the way this serotonin functions with progesterone. Likewise, same with men, thyroid hormones are really, really critical, but we also know estrogen plays a role with dopamine here as well. So it helps sensitize that dopamine receptor. The other thing we understand as well is that estrogen plays a main role, or major role, in elevating our limbic system, elevating our emotional senses, especially amygdala function, along with our stress hormones as well. So when we start getting an elevation of estrogen, whether it be women or men, we'll start winding up our emotional centers. So if you're a male and we're having a high carb diet, we're highly stressed, and you're moving into your 40s, the result for a lot of men may be a decreased testosterone and increased estrogen level, which means poor serotonin functionality and excessive stimulation of our emotional centers, and this can drive emotional issues or mental health issues in men. When we start looking at women, stress, and we've got a ton of videos on stress, jump on our site and you can have a look through that stuff, but stress with women often will lower progesterone levels and increase estrogen levels, and this does a similar thing in terms of decreasing the effectiveness of serotonin on that frontal cortex, and then also stimulating the emotional centers, once again driving that stress mechanism, driving anxiety and things like that, and making us more emotional and sometimes even highly teary as well. Alright, so that's a nice little insight, a brief insight into the role that our hormones for men and women play on our brain health when we start talking about mental health issues. If you are having any mental health issues, please reach out for help. Mental health is a big problem, especially post-COVID and post the lockdowns we've had here in Melbourne. If you do need help, please just reach out. If you do have other questions in relation to what we've covered here, just post up the questions below or message me personally, send me a PM. I'm always happy to help out and advise people in any way, shape or form that we can, and perhaps even point you in the right direction of how you can go about trying to get your hormones under control and perhaps help your mental health status as well. Anyway guys, that's it for me for now. Have a fantastic week, and we'll see you in the next vid. Bye for now.